Hi, how's it going, everyone? I kind of want to give a little talk about why I'm kind of starting to use Next.js for like all of my little prototype apps. If you haven't heard of Next.js, it's basically just a framework on top of React that provides server-side rendering. It provides static site generation. It does like image optimization and stuff like that. So I guess you really just need to take a step back to understand like the benefits of Next. And in order to do that, you need to understand like search engine optimization and why sometimes loading stuff from the back end in one request is better than like a single page application. So when React first came out, like a lot of people just built single page applications and it works great. That's actually what I do at my job. We have a single page application, and when you load the app, it basically downloads an entire bundle that could be like a couple megabytes, and then you gzip it so it makes it like a couple of hundred of kilobytes. But if I were to go and show like how Next is doing this, actually, I haven't really even looked at this, so I can't really even talk about it. But so a single page app is great in the sense that everything is just delivered up front and you can kind of build really good user experiences. But there's a lot of downsides to them. The main thing is like routing. Um, if you don't do your routing correctly in a single page application, when you do the back button and forward button, you'd expect the previous view that you're on to kind of change. But what happens in a lot of apps is that like clicking on this is not a route change, but maybe you do want that to be something related to the push state. Okay. You also like, because it's a single page application, like you could kind of make every month be in a URL, and then you can kind of simply just go to the URL to go to that month. So it's just a little bit of more overhead, and single page apps aren't really that great when it comes to search engine optimization because the web crawler has to actually go to your page and load the page, run the JavaScript. Who knows how long it's going to take for your JavaScript to finish running before it populates the DOM with actual like text. And then it crawls over your text to get like keywords. So you can just imagine there's other stuff that you have to do in order to like allow the search engine to actually like index your page correctly. And there's like libraries out there. I think there's one called like Helmet or something, or I'm not too sure. I don't really work on apps that need search engine optimization. It's a private app behind a login. So like we don't want Google, indexing a private site because it doesn't make sense. So a single page application works great there. But the main benefits of Next, I'm sure I didn't really explain everything about SPAs, but there's some cons to SPAs. Um, but there's also some benefits. It's like really easy to just upload that SPA to a CDN, content delivery network, and your entire React application is just hosted as static files that are downloaded. Versus Next, if you aren't just doing 100% pure server side generation, you have to have like a running Next server, right? Um, I guess I should explain Next. So Next kind of takes React and allows you to do server-side generation and server-side rendering, which basically means you have a running server, 24/7 is just running. And when people make requests to your Next application, it's actually going to go and look through your different routes that you have defined. This is kind of how they do it. They do file-based routing here. So if I go to like slash, for example, if I go to, my localhost 3000, that's going to hit my index page. If I were to add more folders and like different file names, depending on the route that you go to, like let's say I had a route called hello, well, that would hit an endpoint called like hello.js, right? So Next does file-based routing, which I like. It's actually kind of convenient, especially if you're a beginner. You don't have to worry about setting up React Router and then downloading all this other stuff and getting it all configured and hooked up. Honestly, it doesn't take too long to do with this SPA, but Next is just out of the box. It's kind of convenient, and you can easily like parse those things out of the URL. Can't speak today. And they also have a cool way to like basically when the browser hits your next URL, you can have the server make a request to your database to get that data, and then it can render the page still in the server. It's going to render that page, and then it sends back that page with like an initial rendered state to the front end, so that when the web crawler kind of crawls your website, it's getting that data all up front. It has the text already. It can kind of read through it, index it, and it doesn't have to run much JavaScript because everything is kind of already hydrated on the page. Right. And I think they do a lot of other stuff. Like you can read through the Next docs. They do a lot of other performance things that you don't want to have to waste your time as a developer doing yourself. So that's kind of like the main benefits of Next. If you need to build a website that is heavily on search engine optimization, like you should probably use Next. Or just in general, if you want to have a startup, because there's a lot of stuff out there. Like there's a hosting company called Vercel, if I pronounce that correctly, and you can basically just upload your Next app to a repo and point this to your repo, and it'll automatically deploy it. I'm not saying I'm not like sponsored by this company, but if you're a beginner, you don't know much about DevOps, you don't know much about how to manage, monitor, or host servers. Like there's a lot of things out there that just like you just point it to your repo and boom, your stuff's hosted. You can use like AWS Amplify. I think they have like libraries for hosting Next servers. And then all your API endpoints could be behind like serverless functions that kind of save costs. So there's just a lot of cool stuff that's built into this out of the box that you don't have to worry about. And if you're trying to like hit the ground running with a startup and, you know, run as fast as possible, you don't want to waste time like downloading, you know, create React app, setting up a single page application, doing all this extra stuff to make it work with web crawlers, doing all this extra stuff to make it performant, especially when these libraries out here that kind of do all this for us. Now, in terms of like downsides, I guess, the only thing I could really think of is like the fact that I don't really like server-side rendering stuff. Ever since I joined the industry, everything has always been like single-page applications. And I'm always hesitant about using frameworks because if you don't correctly design your components, you can be very, very coupled to the framework that you chose, right? So if I'm not careful about how I'm like using or kind of creating my components and I have a bunch of like Next code that's nested inside of my components, if we decide that we wanted to kind of grab a lot of these components and use them in like a create React app single page application or use them in like a React native app, well, now it's a lot harder to kind of grab out code and use it in your, you know, other choice because now you have like code that's like embedded in your React components that you need to think about. This might not even be a real issue. To be honest, I haven't worked with Next professionally, so I'm just kind of speculating. But anytime you couple your UI to your backend, you can run into some issues. But I do believe that they require your API stuff to be on a separate decoupled endpoints. And like when this page loads, I believe you like export get server side props. I haven't really done this too much, but basically it's a function that runs when this page loads where you can fetch data from your API and then like pass that to your component. Now it's more performant to do that because if you imagine as a user, just even this example, when I load this page, it has to go to my backend or go to a CDN, download the React code, initialize it, render it to the Chrome browser. And then there's some code that runs like a use effect on mount hook that has to go back to my API just to get the initial load data. And then it has to run that and show that. Right. And if you were watching in my videos, you've seen that where like these checkboxes might have been defaulted to true when the page loads. But then like half a second later, when the API request finishes, this stuff just switches because there's already like an initial state that this page needs. So Next kind of takes care of that because it doesn't show any of this on the page until it's all loaded from the API and then the first request is sent over from the backend. I'm sure there's a lot of other benefits. Honestly, I didn't really plan this talk too well, so I don't even know what the heck I'm talking about. But I like using Next. If you're a beginner, I would say don't be afraid of learning Next. It's not too hard. Just the file-based routing out of the box is a huge benefit over the single-page application stuff. And then if you need to like share state between components, like just use the use context hook. If you really want to use Redux, you can. I don't think you should use Redux. It's like a over-engineered mess, in my opinion. But yeah, I guess what I want to wrap up with is if you ask me what technology or tool I would use for a startup, I would probably use Next.js just because you don't want to waste time doing all this extra configuration. You just want to write some code and get it deployed. And then also, you want to use some existing deployment method, which you don't want to waste time like monitoring servers and making sure your logging is set up and making sure you can have alerts set up. And what happens if your server dies? Do you have something set up to automatically restart it using PM2? So there's like two sides to developing apps. There's like actually writing the application code and then deploying it and monitoring it and then like keeping it maintained. So I guess what I'm saying is like I would definitely pick Next.js, but just make sure your components aren't too coupled to Next in general, because every framework and library seems to die after a couple of years, and you don't want all your code to like be coupled to Next in case there's a better one that comes out. Which I think one came out. I don't know if it's better, but one came out. I forgot the name of it. But yeah, that's all I kind of wanted to talk about. I don't know if I actually said anything useful or worth listening to, but I hope you guys learned something. But just to say, like, I still use a single page application at work. Tons of people are still doing single page applications. Uh, there's pros and cons. There's trade offs to every approach. Don't feel like just because someone on Twitter or YouTube made a video about Next that it is the way forward. Like there are still benefits to single page applications, and it's kind of your responsibility to go and read up on the pros and cons. But yeah, in terms of developer experience, I definitely choose Next. Anyway, I want to wrap up this talk. Don't know where I was going with it, but have a good day and happy coding.